Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Alex Connors inherited his late aunt's lakeside cabin, he thought he'd found the perfect retreat to heal from the loss of his wife and a military career cut short. But his peaceful sanctuary soon became a battleground when the local HOA, led by the ruthless Linda Watson, decided his presence was unwelcome. Alex Connors, a former Marine, once thrived on discipline, camaraderie, and a sense of purpose. However, his military career came to an abrupt halt after a life-altering injury during a routine mission. The physical wounds healed over time, but the invisible scars lingered, leaving him grappling with a sense of loss and uncertainty about his future. Transitioning to civilian life, Alex built a new career in IT, leveraging his analytical skills and discipline. His job provided stability, but the bustling city life in Boston felt stifling and unfulfilling. Then tragedy struck again. Alex's wife, Emily, his anchor and partner through life's challenges, lost her battle with a debilitating illness. The grief was unbearable, and the walls of their shared apartment seemed to echo with memories of what he had lost. Struggling to move forward, Alex realized he needed a drastic change, a sanctuary where he could heal and redefine his purpose. The answer came unexpectedly, tucked away in the form of an inheritance. Alex's late Aunt Margaret, whom he fondly remembered from childhood summers, had left him her cozy lakeside cabin. Nestled on the outskirts of Lakeside Harbor, a small, serene community in Maine, the cabin stood on the edge of a dense forest overlooking a tranquil lake. Alex vividly recalled the warmth of Aunt Margaret's stories by the fireplace, the sweet taste of fresh blueberries he'd picked with her, and the peace he'd felt exploring the nearby trails. The cabin represented everything he yearned for: solace, simplicity, and a connection to a happier time. The decision to leave Boston wasn't easy, but Alex knew he couldn't find peace amid the chaos of the city. As rent prices skyrocketed and his remote IT job gave him the freedom to work from anywhere, the move to the cabin felt inevitable. Selling off most of his belongings, Alex packed his essentials and set off for Maine, hoping to find clarity in the serenity of the woods. Arriving at the cabin, Alex was met with a mix of nostalgia and determination. The exterior of the cabin was weathered but sturdy, its wooden shingles bearing the marks of years spent enduring Maine's seasons. Inside, it was modest but inviting. A single bedroom, a small but functional kitchen, and a cozy living area centered around a stone fireplace. The air smelled faintly of pine and aged wood, and the large windows framed picturesque views of the lake and surrounding forest. The first few months were transformative. Alex threw himself into restoring the cabin, repairing the roof, sanding the floors, and repainting the walls. He set up a small workspace by a window overlooking the lake, where he spent his workdays coding and troubleshooting. In the evenings, he hiked through the forest, kayaked on the lake, and sat by the fire, savoring the quiet. For the first time in years, he felt a semblance of peace. The townspeople of Lakeside Harbor were kind, but reserved. Alex met a few neighbors during his trips to the local store, exchanging polite nods and small talk. They seemed curious about the new occupant of Margaret's cabin, but didn't pry, leaving Alex to adjust to his new life at his own pace. Yet, beneath the tranquility of his new surroundings, Alex couldn't shake a faint sense of unease. The cabin, while a haven, also held an air of isolation. He noticed how some of the locals hesitated when he mentioned his plans to live there year-round. "Oh, Margaret always treated it as a summer home," one elderly man commented, avoiding eye contact. Another neighbor cryptically added, "It's a quiet place, but you'll want to stay on the right side of things around here." At first, Alex brushed off these remarks as small-town quirks. After all, he wasn't looking to disrupt the community. He just wanted peace and solitude. However, as the days passed, subtle signs of resistance began to surface. A few neighbors stopped waving when he passed by, and once he spotted a woman in a pristine SUV parked just beyond his property line, staring at the cabin before driving away. Unbothered, Alex continued to settle in, determined to make the cabin his home. Little did he know that this peaceful retreat would soon become the center of an escalating battle, a conflict that would test his resilience, challenge his rights, and draw him into a web of small-town politics and personal vendettas. Alex had just finished setting up his work desk by the large window overlooking the lake. The morning sun spilled golden light over the cabin, creating a serene backdrop for another productive day. As he sipped his coffee, the sudden sharp knock at the door jolted him out of his thoughts. Rarely did anyone visit unannounced. Curious and slightly wary, Alex set his mug down and approached the door. Standing on the porch was a woman in her mid-60s with a sharp haircut, pressed khaki slacks, and a clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. Her posture radiated authority, and her piercing gaze swept over Alex with a mix of disapproval and scrutiny. "Good morning," she said curtly, her tone more formal than friendly. "I'm Linda Watson, the president of the Lakeside Harbor Homeowners Association. You must be Mr. Connors." "Good morning," Alex replied evenly. "Yes, I'm Alex. How can I help you?" Linda didn't bother with pleasantries. "I need to discuss an important matter regarding your use of this property." She glanced over his shoulder, her eyes briefly scanning the interior of the cabin before landing back on him. "Are you aware that this community is designated strictly as a vacation area? Permanent residency is not permitted." Alex frowned, caught off guard. "I wasn't aware of that," he said carefully. "This is my property. I inherited it from my Aunt Margaret. I've been living here full-time since moving from Boston." Linda's expression hardened. "That's precisely the issue, Mr. Connors. The HOA has clear bylaws prohibiting year-round occupancy. When your aunt was alive, she abided by these rules. As her successor, you are now bound by them as well." Alex felt a flicker of irritation but kept his composure. "I've reviewed the documents my aunt left me, and I don't recall seeing anything about restrictions on residency. This is private property, and I have the deed to prove it." Linda raised an eyebrow and extended her clipboard. "The rules are outlined in the HOA bylaws, which apply to all property owners in Lakeside Harbor. This is a tightly knit community, Mr. Connors, with standards designed to preserve its character. Full-time residents disrupt that balance." Alex took a steadying breath. "I appreciate your concerns, but I'm not part of this HOA. My aunt purchased this cabin decades ago, long before any association existed. As far as I know, I'm not obligated to follow these bylaws." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. She reached into her folder and pulled out a sheet of paper, thrusting it toward him. "These are the HOA's bylaws. You may not have signed anything, but the association governs this area. By inheriting the property, you assumed responsibility for adhering to its rules." Alex glanced at the document but didn't take it. "With all due respect, I'd need time to review this with my attorney. I'm not sure you have the authority to enforce these rules on me." Linda's face flushed, a mix of frustration and indignation. "Mr. Connors, let me be clear. You have 48 hours to vacate the property. If you fail to comply, the HOA will be forced to escalate this matter, including imposing fines and seeking legal remedies. I strongly advise you to cooperate." Alex's jaw tightened. "I'll look into it," he said firmly, "but I'm not leaving my home based on threats. If there's an issue, I'd prefer to handle it through the proper channels." Linda didn't respond immediately. She studied Alex as if gauging whether he understood the weight of her words. Finally, she straightened her clipboard and gave a clipped nod. "Very well, Mr. Connors, but don't test our resolve. Rules are rules." With that, Linda spun on her heel and strode back to her car, parked just outside his driveway. Alex stood in the doorway, watching as she drove away, her brake lights lingering at the end of the road before disappearing around the bend. Closing the door, Alex leaned against it, his mind racing. The encounter left a bitter taste. Who was this woman to tell him he couldn't live in the home he owned? And why did she seem so determined to enforce rules that didn't align with his understanding of his property rights? Over the next hour, Alex sifted through the documents his aunt had left him, searching for anything mentioning the HOA. There were tax records, the deed, and even receipts for past repairs, but nothing about the association or its bylaws. Frustrated but resolute, Alex decided it was time to consult an attorney. Though the lake outside his window remained calm and inviting, Alex couldn't shake the storm brewing in his chest. Something told him this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The tension from Linda's visit lingered like a storm cloud over Alex's once peaceful retreat. Determined not to be intimidated, he spent the next few hours combing through the documents his aunt had left behind. Deeds, tax records, even an old insurance policy. Nothing contained any mention of HOA regulations or bylaws. Frustration mounted, but Alex wasn't ready to give up. He called his attorney, Melissa Ward, a specialist in property disputes, and explained the situation. "From what you're describing," Melissa said after a brief pause, "it sounds like this HOA is overstepping. If the property predates their establishment, their rules may not apply to you. But to be safe, document everything. Any interactions, written notices, and even casual conversations. If they're harassing you, we'll need proof." Armed with her advice, Alex set up his phone to record audio and downloaded an app to log every interaction. He felt more prepared, but the 48-hour deadline Linda had imposed loomed ominously. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Sure enough, at exactly noon 2 days later, Alex heard tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Peering through the window, he saw Linda stepping out of her SUV, a clipboard in hand. This time, she was alone. Alex activated his phone recorder and stepped outside to meet her. "Good afternoon, Mr. Connors," Linda said tersely, her tone dripping with false civility. "I trust you've taken my instructions seriously and are ready to comply." "I've reviewed my documents and consulted my attorney," Alex replied evenly. "There's nothing that obligates me to follow your HOA rules. This is my property, and I'm not vacating." Linda's expression darkened. "Then you leave me no choice but to escalate the matter. You're in violation of community bylaws, and the HOA will begin imposing fines immediately. Failure to pay those fines will result in further legal action." Alex crossed his arms, standing firm. "You can send me all the fines you want, but without legal grounds, they mean nothing. Now, unless you have something else to discuss, I'm asking you to leave my property." Linda's face flushed red, her composure faltering. "How dare you speak to me like that? Do you have any idea who I am?" Alex maintained his calm. "I do, and I'm asking you again. Leave. If you don't, I'll have no choice but to call the police." For a moment, Linda looked as if she might explode, but then she spun on her heel and stormed back to her car, muttering about how he would regret this. Alex stayed rooted in place, watching as she drove off, her tires spitting gravel in frustration. Knowing Linda wouldn't back down so easily, Alex immediately called Melissa. He shared the recording and outlined the interaction. Melissa's voice was sharp with concern. "She's crossing boundaries, Alex. I'm filing for an emergency restraining order against her and the HOA on your behalf. In the meantime, be vigilant." Barely 2 hours had passed when Alex heard the sound of an engine again. This time, it wasn't just Linda's SUV. It was a black vehicle with HOA security emblazoned on the side. 2 burly men stepped out, both carrying what looked like batons. Linda followed behind, her expression a mixture of triumph and venom. "Mr. Connors," Linda called out, her voice rising as the men approached the porch. "We're here to enforce HOA rules. You've left us no choice but to take direct action." Alex quickly locked the door, grabbed his phone, and hit record on both the camera and the audio recorder. From outside, one of the men banged on the door. "Open up," he barked. "You're trespassing." Alex called back through the door. "I've already contacted the police. Leave now, or you'll be arrested." Linda's voice cut through the commotion. "You're only making this worse for yourself, Mr. Connors. Come out and resolve this peacefully, or we'll have to remove you by force." Alex's patience snapped. "You have no authority here, Linda. If you or your so-called security take another step, you'll be breaking the law." The banging grew louder, and Alex braced himself. One of the men began kicking the door, but Alex timed it perfectly, opening it just as the man's foot connected. Thrown off balance, the security guard stumbled inside and fell hard onto the floor. Alex swiftly disarmed him, grabbing the baton and tossing it aside. The second guard lunged forward, but Alex ducked under his swing, countered with a precise strike, and sent him sprawling. Linda's triumphant smirk dissolved into shock and fear. Before she could react, the sound of sirens filled the air. Alex stepped out onto the porch as a police car pulled into the driveway. "I'm the one who called," he said firmly, pointing at Linda and her guards. "These people are trespassing and have attempted to break into my home." The officers quickly took control of the situation, cuffing the guards and escorting Linda to the car. She shouted threats and accusations, but Alex stood firm, his hands steady as he handed over his recordings to the police. As the vehicles disappeared down the road, Alex exhaled deeply. He knew the battle with Linda and the HOA was far from over, but this time he had the upper hand and the law on his side. The aftermath of Linda's failed intimidation attempt left Alex shaken but resolute. He was done playing defense. Now it was time to take the offensive. The following morning, he called his attorney, Melissa Ward, to relay everything that had transpired, from the recorded threats to the physical altercation with Linda's hired security. Melissa's tone was firm but reassuring. "Alex, we have more than enough to pursue legal action. Her behavior has gone beyond harassment. This is trespassing, intimidation, and even potential assault. I'll file a civil suit for damages and request a temporary restraining order against Linda and the HOA, but we'll need to build a rock-solid case." Alex agreed, and Melissa laid out the plan. First, they would compile all evidence, audio recordings, video footage, and the police report from the incident. Second, they would gather testimonies from witnesses, neighbors who might have observed Linda's behavior or had their own grievances with her heavy-handed tactics. Lastly, Melissa would dig into the HOA's records, looking for inconsistencies or mismanagement under Linda's leadership that could further discredit her. Alex spent the next few days combing through his recordings, carefully documenting every interaction with Linda. Each time he replayed her venomous words or her brazen orders to enforce HOA rules, his resolve grew stronger. This wasn't just about protecting his home anymore. It was about standing up to the injustice and bullying that Linda had inflicted on others as well. Word of the altercation spread quickly through Lakeside Harbor, and to Alex's surprise, some neighbors began to reach out. At first, it was just a cautious wave or a polite nod during his trips to the local store. But soon, a few brave residents approached him directly. "I heard what happened," said Harold, a soft-spoken retiree who lived a few streets away. "Linda's been running the HOA like her own little dictatorship for years. She fines people for the smallest things and pockets the money for who knows what." Another neighbor, a single mother named Laura, confided her own story. "She threatened to fine me for having my kids' bikes in the driveway. When I couldn't pay, she said she'd report me to child services. I've been terrified of her ever since." As Alex listened, a pattern emerged. Linda's reign of power was built on fear and manipulation. Many residents were too intimidated to push back. But now, emboldened by Alex's stand, they were willing to speak out. Harold and Laura agreed to testify, and several others followed suit. Meanwhile, Melissa uncovered damning evidence during her investigation of the HOA's finances. Linda had been funneling HOA funds into personal accounts under the guise of administrative fees. Additionally, there were discrepancies in how fines were issued, with no clear records or proper authorization for many of them. "Alex, this is big," Melissa said during a phone call. "If we can prove she mismanaged HOA funds, it'll not only strengthen our case, but could lead to criminal charges against her. Keep gathering those testimonies, and I'll handle the paperwork to push this to court as soon as possible." Despite the mounting support, Alex remained cautious. Linda was not the type to go down quietly, and her past actions had proven she was capable of extreme measures. He installed additional security cameras around his property and kept a close eye on any unusual activity. One afternoon, as Alex was working on repairs to his cabin's deck, a familiar SUV slowed to a stop at the edge of his driveway. Linda stepped out, her expression tight and calculated. Alex instinctively hit record on his phone and moved to the edge of the deck. "I'm here to resolve this matter peacefully," Linda said, holding up her hands as if in surrender. "No need to involve lawyers or courts. Let's settle this like adults." Alex folded his arms. "And what exactly do you propose?" "I'll offer you $40,000 to drop the lawsuit and forget about all this," Linda said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "That's more than generous. You'll never hear from me or the HOA again." The offer might have tempted Alex under different circumstances, but he couldn't forget the stories his neighbors had shared or the fear in their voices. Accepting Linda's deal would mean abandoning them to her tyranny. "No deal," Alex said firmly. "This goes to court." Linda's mask slipped and her face twisted with fury. "You'll regret this," she hissed before storming back to her car. As her SUV disappeared down the road, Alex felt a surge of determination. The battle wasn't over yet, but he had the evidence, the community's support, and the law on his side. For the first time since the conflict began, he felt a glimmer of hope. This wasn't just about defending his home. It was about holding Linda accountable and ensuring justice for everyone she had wronged. The courtroom was packed. News of the case had spread beyond Lakeside Harbor, drawing attention to Linda's aggressive tactics and the HOA's questionable practices. Alex sat at the plaintiff's table alongside Melissa, his attorney, while Linda sat across from them, flanked by a sharply dressed legal team. Despite her composed demeanor, there was an unmistakable tension in her posture. The trial began with Melissa presenting a clear timeline of events: Linda's harassment, the unlawful visit with her hired security, and her repeated violations of Alex's rights as a property owner. Video and audio recordings played a crucial role, each one painting a vivid picture of Linda's arrogance and abuse of power. "Your Honor," Melissa said firmly, "this is not a case of enforcing community standards. This is a case of harassment, trespassing, and misuse of authority. Mr. Connors is not just defending his property, he's standing up to a pattern of abuse that has plagued this community for years." Next, the testimonies began. Harold, the soft-spoken retiree, recounted how Linda had fined him for a cracked sidewalk, despite it being HOA property. Laura, the single mother, described the intimidation she faced when Linda threatened to report her to child services over trivial violations. Each witness painted Linda as a tyrant who used fear to control the community. Melissa then presented financial records obtained during discovery. The documents revealed that Linda had siphoned HOA funds into personal accounts under dubious pretenses. There were also inconsistencies in how fines were issued and collected, with large sums unaccounted for. When Linda's turn came to defend herself, her attorney attempted to discredit Alex and the witnesses, suggesting they were exaggerating or misinterpreting events. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The videos showed Linda issuing threats, and the financial records exposed a pattern of corruption. Even her own legal team seemed to falter under the weight of the facts. As the trial reached its conclusion, Melissa delivered a powerful closing argument. This case is about accountability. It's about standing up to those who misuse their authority for personal gain. Mr. Connors didn't just fight for himself. He fought for an entire community that has suffered under Ms. Watson's rule. We ask the court to deliver justice. The judge took little time to deliberate. The ruling was decisive. Linda was found guilty of harassment, trespassing, and misappropriation of funds. She was ordered to pay Alex $160,000 in damages and was barred from holding any position of authority within the HOA. Additionally, criminal charges for embezzlement and tax fraud were forwarded to the district attorney. As Linda was escorted out of the courtroom, her once commanding presence reduced to a bitter scowl, Alex felt a profound sense of relief. The fight had been exhausting, but justice had prevailed. For the first time in months, he could look forward to living in peace. The dust began to settle after the trial, and Lakeside Harbor felt like a different place. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact with Alex now stopped by to thank him. Harold dropped off a bottle of homemade wine, and Laura brought her kids to visit, their laughter filling the air as they explored Alex's lakeside property. The once intimidating presence of the HOA had dissolved, leaving room for a sense of camaraderie to take root. Linda Watson, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, was no longer a looming threat. Following her conviction, she faced additional criminal charges for embezzlement and tax fraud, with a potential prison sentence looming over her. Her downfall sent a ripple of relief through the community as residents began uncovering the extent of her misdeeds. Despite the victory, Alex remained cautious. He installed additional security cameras around his property and reinforced the locks on his doors. Melissa had warned him that appeals or backlash could still arise, though the chances were slim. One quiet afternoon, Alex found himself thinking about Emily, his late wife. Her memory had been his guiding light through the darkest moments of the ordeal. Feeling the pull of their shared dreams, he drove to the local animal shelter and adopted a golden retriever puppy, a dog Emily had always dreamed of having. The puppy, with its floppy ears and boundless energy, became Alex's steadfast companion. Over the following months, Alex poured his energy into his home. He built a garden in Emily's honor, filling it with her favorite flowers. He repaired the dock by the lake and even hosted a neighborhood barbecue, inviting everyone who had supported him. For the first time since moving in, the cabin didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a home. As Alex sat on his deck one evening, the puppy curled up at his feet. He gazed at the lake, its surface reflecting the fiery hues of the setting sun. This place had become more than just a retreat. It was a testament to resilience, community, and the power of standing up for what's right. In the quiet stillness of the woods, Alex found something he hadn't dared to hope for: peace.